Good evening. It's Tuesday night, so it's time for another episode of the Paranormal Lens podcast. I'm Chad Thomas, and I'm here with my co-host, Jamie Widener. Jamie, how are you?
Hey, Chad, I'm great. Happy Tuesday. It's good
Yeah.
to be back.
How was that for an intro?
It was like, here's that other guy.
So what's going on, Jamie?
Dude, it's been a week again. You know, how do they keep going by so fast?
I don't know.
I can't say I did anything. Just here we are. So
next thing you know, the kids are going to be in school, and we'll have that fun.
I know. Oh, I keep reminding them too. Like every Sunday, I'm like, "You got 3 weeks. You got a month. You got 3 weeks. This weekend will be 2 weeks to go." And they give me a glare, and I'm like, "It's going to happen. Don't glare at me."
Exactly.
What do we need to do? So school shopping has started, and all the planning and prepping, and here we go again.
So
180-day sprint to the end.
So some of our good friends are here already. Glad to see everybody.
Hey, Kyle.
And
see Todd and Carmela too. Good evening, guys.
And I'm a little nervous because I think Todd and Carmela were just visiting where
there's a good reason they're here.
So a little worried about that. I hope I get the facts right. So,
dude, seriously, no pressure. Just don't F it up, okay?
Great, thanks. No pressure. So, anything else before we get started, Jamie? Or
how about you? Anything you did over the weekend? Anywhere you been? Nothing. I don't know. I lost track of you for a while there. So
no, nothing exciting. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough people to do investigation this weekend.
Our gig got canceled, sadly.
But
I think that's only the second time out of like 3 or 4 years we've been doing this. We just had low, and it's summer, right? So people are on vacation and stuff just happens, and spooky season is coming. So we'll obviously ramp up a lot. So it's okay.
Yep.
Hey, Jenny. Hey, Jenny.
Good evening. Tonight. So anyway, so let me get into this. We're talking about the history of Laurel Hill Cemetery. Now, this one's going to be a little different because we usually are like, is it paranormal or not? Well, it's. Right. I pulled together some stories that I found on a website, the things that might be paranormal, but we'll see. So anyway,
hey, hold on, you got to see this. LOL, no pressure from Todd Carmel. Okay, wing.
Oh, great.
We got
no pressure. So anyway, Jamie, to start off with,
the Lynches are checking in from Massachusetts, so you got to say hi there.
Hello, Lynches. Glad you could join us.
Hope you're having a wicked great vacation. Yeah.
So, all right. So, Jamie, when you think of a cemetery, what comes to mind? I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Boy, a lot of things. Tombstones, dead people, calm, quiet, serene, usually,
Okay.
Sometimes a place with a view of some sort.
Okay.
Final resting places. So, you want something nice.
Okay. So if you would go
zombies, maybe, I don't know. It depends on what neighborhood it's in.
Okay. So if the word cemetery comes from the Greek, and it's the word means sleeping chamber. So that you would, that sort of fits, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So would you have thought of I just lost my place here. Would you have thought of going to the cemetery on a Sunday afternoon with the family for a nice walk to look at well-manicured gardens?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. What about going to the cemetery on a Saturday morning for a market or a fair?
I've done that. So yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
that's
a
possibility.
Okay. What would you do if you saw a cow grazing between headstones?
I'd say you're in the country. But maybe.
So at
hold on. Lawn maintenance people are very expensive. So there's a good chance that's just a cost saver, right?
Maybe that's usually goats, though.
The goat took the day off, and the cow had to come in.
All right. Yeah. So at one point in history, all these things were typical for a cemetery, and believe it or not, farmers actually thought that they got better milk from cows that grazed in cemeteries. So. Okay. There you go. So if you study human history, group burial plots are relatively new. For much of human history, we didn't even bury our dead. It was believed that burial was actually used to deny unworthy people the normal rites of death and what might come afterwards. So by burying them, they thought that they would lock them there and they wouldn't get to go to the afterlife, which is an interesting concept for the early people. But once it was realized that burying people protected the dead, their remains from scavengers, it became more of an accepted practice. Because a lot of times they would leave the dead in caves or, in a nice picturesque place, or sometimes they were just dumped in rivers and streams and ponds and things like that. But they've realized that by burying them, the scavengers wouldn't get to them, and it was more respectful and so on and so forth. Oh, okay. So it became more accepted practice. The oldest known group burial plot is the Cave of Tafaralt, also known as the Grotta de Pigeon in eastern Morocco. It is believed that the oldest remains there are at least 14,000 years old, but that's not that old considering that humans have been here 300,000 years. But let's jump ahead. The Vikings, yeah, that's true. Vikings,
they were onto something.
But let's jump ahead a few thousand years to the early years of the United States. As towns were being built, a church was typically one of the first buildings to go up. And wherever the church was where the local graveyard ended up. It was convenient and efficient. As more churches were built, more graveyards came. The other place that you may find a graveyard was a homestead. This would be typically the relatives of someone who owned the homestead, and this was more prevalent in the areas that were rural or not near towns. And here we're using, in those two cases, we're using the word graveyard, because if it's tied to a church or a homestead, it's considered a graveyard, not a cemetery. So there's a distinction there.
It's a difference, right?
Mm-hmm. In the early 1830s, the rural cemetery movement started to hit the United States in the cities. In 1831, the city of Boston became concerned about the number of graveyards within the city limits. Corpses were interred in wooden coffins, which along with the bodies would decompose. Officials began to worry about the health hazards that could develop. Space was also limited. Graveyards took up valuable land in cities that could be used for other purposes. So a plan to develop a rural cemetery outside of Boston was born, and Mount Auburn Cemetery was built about 4 miles outside the city limits. So that was the first city that we know of in the United States that went with the rural cemetery movement. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, a man by the name of John J. Smith was upset about the way his daughter's remains had been handled and interned at the Arch Street Meeting House burial grounds. Smith wrote, "Philadelphia should have a rural cemetery on dry ground, where feelings should not be harrowed by viewing the bodies of beloved relatives plunged into mud and water." This led him to form what would be known as the Laurel Hill Cemetery Company. He, along with Benjamin Wood Richards, William Strickland, and Nathan Dunn, all prominent members of Philadelphia society, purchased 32 acres of land from the former estate of Joseph Sims, a well-known Philadelphia businessman. The estate had been known as Laurel Hills. The cemetery was 3 miles north of the Schuylkill River. When designed, it was considered safe from urban sprawl. Of course, the city has grown past the cemetery, but Laurel Hill still keeps its rural feel. As it was developing the cemetery, the company accepted several design proposals, but in the end, it decided on the one presented by John Notman. Notman's design preserved the topography of the property, creating a string of terraces that led down to the river. The original cemetery was completed by 1839. This included a gatehouse, which consisted of massive Roman arches surrounded by an imposing classical colonnade and topped with a large ornamental urn. A large Gothic Revival-style chapel was also built on the property, but it was removed in the 1880s, so there would be more space for grave sites. The Laurel Hill Cemetery Company purchased a set of 3 statues from the sculptor James Tome in 1836. The statues were based on the book by Sir Walter Scott named Old Mortality. The tale is of Scott talking to an elderly man who traveled through the Scottish Highlands on his horse. As he traveled, he would recarve weathered tombstones. The ownership saw this story paralleling their own goals, to keep the cemetery in perpetual care so future generations may remember the deceased. As time went on, Laurel Hill started to get crowded, so purchases were made to enlarge the cemetery. In 1844, 27 acres of land were purchased from the estate of William Rawle. This was a half-mile south of the current location. The addition was named South Laurel Hill. In 1849, a set of sandstone piers and iron gates were installed at the southeast corner of the cemetery. This became a secondary entrance to the facility. In 1855, 10 acres known as the Stover Tract were purchased from Frederick Stover with authorization from the Pennsylvania State Assembly. In 1861, the George Pepper Estate, located between the two cemeteries, was purchased, and this was called Central Laurel Hill. Hunting Park Avenue ran between South and Central Laurel Hill, so a bridge was constructed to allow unrestricted access between the different sections. These purchases brought the total acreage to about 95, which is what it is today in the Laurel Hill East Cemetery. Growth was limited to Laurel Hill due to the urban sprawl of Philadelphia and the creation of Fairmount Park. John J. Smith, who we talked about before, is one of the founders, purchased 200 acres of land from 3 farms in Ballackinwood. This enabled the creation of West Laurel Hill Cemetery, which had its first interment in 1870. The two cemeteries are not physically connected, but currently managed by the same company. Originally, Laurel Hill had a policy on who could buy burial plots. The majority of those buried were white Protestants. Single people were discouraged from buying plots because the management wanted to keep it a family destination. It wasn't until 1973 that what's that, Jamie?
Okay, sure.
It wasn't
in the era, it makes sense.
Yeah. It wasn't until 1973 that restrictions were lifted and African Americans were allowed to be buried here. In the early 1970s, the cemetery started to see the number of burials decline. Many of the bodies were moved from Laurel Hills to Laurel Hills West. Neglect and vandalism started to take over the remaining graves at Laurel Hill. In the late 70s, the Friends of Laurel Hill Cemetery, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, was founded by the descendants of John J. Smith to support the cemetery. The mission of the Friends is to assist the Laurel Hill Cemetery Company in preserving and promoting the historical character of Laurel Hill. The Friends raise funds and seek contributed services, prepare educational and research material emphasizing the historical, architectural, and cultural importance of Laurel Hill Cemetery, and provide tours, guides to educate the public. The organization was also instrumental in Laurel Hill's placement on the National Register of Historic Places in 1977 and designated as a National Historic Landmark in 1998. As I said before, currently the two cemeteries are run by one company. They have available plots in the combined 265 acres of the two locations. They have burial plot options including single, double, family, cremation, and featured properties. A hero's walk for veterans and first responders. They also have a scattering garden, an interior and exterior niche options for cremains, and they also have an option. Another option is a community mausoleum. So that's the timeline. But what makes Laurel Hills so special? It has always been a place that was meant to be more than a place of mourning. The original idea behind the rural cemetery was the beautification. It was a beautiful destination to visit. From its inception, Laurel Hills was intended to be a civic institution designed for public use. In an era before public parks, museums, and arboretums, it was a multi-purpose cultural attraction where the general public could experience the art and refinement previously known to the wealthy. It became such a destination that by the 1840s, tickets were required to gain entrance to the grounds. One report stated that between April and December of 1848, that 30,000 people visited the cemetery. In the 1860s, nearly 140,000 people visited annually. Looking at the current website, Laurel Hill Cemetery offers many of their own events as well as partner events. These range in historic tours to theater and music events. They also have options for people needing help accepting the death of a loved one. So Laurel Hill still thrives as a tourist destination for many. Though I have not seen any reports of cattle being allowed to graze in Laurel Hill, it is a accredited arboretum with over 6,000 trees and shrubs representing 700 species. Wow. The arboretum is a member of the American Public Gardens Association. So another question that you may have is, who's buried at Laurel Hills? Some of the first people to be buried there were actually Revolutionary War figures. But if you think about the timing, something doesn't quite work there. The ownership of the cemetery thought it would help their notoriety if they had some influential people there. So they reinterred the following people in the new cemetery. Continental Congress Secretary Charles Thompson, Declaration of Independence signer Thomas McKean, Philadelphia war veteran and shipbuilder Jehu Iyer, hero of the Battle of Princeton, Hugh Mercer, and the first director of the U.S. Mint, David Rittenhouse. Other notable people include Matthias Baldwin of the Baldwin Locomotive Works, Henry Derringer, the notable gunsmith, Sarah Josepha Hale, the creator of Thanksgiving and the writer of Mary Had a Little Lamb, General George Meade, Civil War Union Major General, who was the victor at the Battle of Gettysburg, and the list goes on and on. Journalists, mayors, sports figures, and military veterans. There are people from all walks of life here. In just the 74 acres of Laurel Hills, there are over 33,000 graves. Now, Jamie, this one may hit a home run with you. Mr. Harry Callis of It's Out of Here fame is buried there. I figured you know who that is.
I sure do.
Now, there are some grave markers for people who aren't buried there. Adrian Balboa and Pauline Panino have tombstones that sit near the main gatehouse. These were, of course, used when two movies of the Rocky franchise were filmed there. Yep. The cemetery was also used for filming of Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, and Law-Abiding Citizens. Now, the other question that you may want to know is, are there ghosts at Laurel Hill? I can't give you a good answer on that one. My opinion on cemeteries being haunted up until now has been, why would ghosts want to hang out in a cemetery? There's typically no tie to that place other than the body. But Laurel Hill sounds like a nice place to hang out. I found a website called Laurel Hill Cemetery Blog, and I pulled 4 stories from there. Is Laurel Hill's haunted page. Now, they don't say one way or the other, but suggest that if there were any hauntings, it might be from these residents. Now, the first story goes, Martha Drinnen. In 1903, Martha was the daughter of Laurel Hill's caretaker. At 39, she was an unmarried spinstress intended to be a little on the quiet side. On a Sunday morning in November, she was seen headed towards the Laurel Hill train station, which used to be located on the north side of the cemetery. Later, she was seen walking.
Hold on. This is such a thing that had its own train station?
It was a destination. So It would have been the train station on the northern side of the property, yeah.
All right.
If you had 140,000 people coming in a year.
I wonder if that was the last stop on the line. Good night, folks. I'm out.
Anyway. Let's see. So after she was seen at the north side of the cemetery at the train station, she was seen walking on Kelly Drive. She didn't speak to anyone or let anyone know where she was going. It was the last time she was seen alive. In March of 1904, a fisherman discovered a headless body floating on an ice drift in the Delaware Bay. Martha's brother and aunt traveled to New Jersey to identify the body and confirm that it was Martha by the dress she wore. Her remains were buried on the grounds here at Laurel Hill with no marker, as her family was too poor to afford one. So the question is, what happened to Martha? Did she meet her end at the hands of an attacker? Did she slip on some ice and suffer a tragic accident near the river? Did she take her own life? We may never know the answer to these questions. The Friends of Laurel Hill have since placed a marker on her grave, which we hope helps her rest a bit easier. Now, that story was actually the only one that I could find listed as a haunting, because I found that a couple places. Now, the second one is a story of Maurice Fagan. He had served in the Civil War and was honored twice for gallantry during the conflict. Maurice was plagued by terrible pain in his head. Doctors at the time diagnosed him with vague illnesses like rheumatism and neuralgia. Today, some wonder if he might have been stricken with migraines or perhaps some form of PTSD. Either way, the pain was intense, and it drove Fagan and his family easily to distraction. Despite seemingly getting his life back on track after his military service, Fagan continued to be tormented by the pain for the rest of his life. When he realized that no medical interventions were helping, he sought to take matters into his own hands. In a letter to his younger sister, he explained that he would soon rest among their departed family members at Laurel Hill. Sadly, he was correct. Maurice went to his family plot and ended his life with a gunshot to the head, likely an attempt to put an end to his pain once and for all. So there's questions of whether maybe he's haunting the cemetery. The third story says, Henrietta Garrett. Henrietta was a young, relatively poor woman when she caught the eye of millionaire Walter Garrett. He owned a snuff tobacco company and was very wealthy as a result. The two married, much to the chagrin of Walter's family, and by all accounts, the couple was quite happy until Walter's death. In his will, Walter left his $6 million estate to Henrietta. We may never know exactly why Henrietta didn't make a complete will of her own, but by the time she died some 30 years later, she had only accounted for a small percentage of what by then was a $17 million fortune. Henrietta had a misfortune of dying in November of 1930, approximately 1 year into the Great Depression. Desperate people from all over the world began surfacing and claiming some kind of relationship to Henrietta, and hopefully thereby inheriting her money. In the end, over 26,000 people made claims, and a special court was set up just to hear them. Somehow or other, a rumor got started that Henrietta had been buried with her will. This sparked a public outcry calling for her exhumation. Laurel Hill felt so much pressure about this matter that they posted a 24-hour guard at her grave to ensure that nobody tried to dig her up themselves. Eventually, when Henrietta was exhumed, the entire process was photographed and filmed so that the lawyers could prove that a will either was or wasn't found with her body. It wasn't. After a media and legal circus lasting over 20 years, it was determined that two of Henrietta's cousins would each get $2 million. The rest of the money went where else? To legal fees from all the court hearings. If Henrietta had an opinion about all of this, perhaps she would want to voice it somehow. So maybe she haunts the cemetery.
Okay.
And finally, one last person here, Dr. Elwood Kirby. Elwood Kirby made his living both teaching and practicing medicine. He amassed a great deal of money in his time, which made him both very wealthy and very charitable. He was known to offer medical care to the elite of Philadelphia, but also to the impoverished at no charge. He died in his sleep from a heart attack on Christmas night in 1935. He left behind a small fortune, which was divided among his family members and favored charities. He was buried in his family mausoleum, where he rested silently for about 10 weeks. A group of vandals got the idea that Kirby had been buried like a pharaoh with gold and jewels strewn about his grave. Between Kirby and the story of Henrietta Garrett above, it seemed like this idea took hold frequently during the Great Depression. The vandals waited for a dark night without much traffic, scaled the cemetery walls. They broke into the Kirby family mausoleum, dragged the heavy casket outside, and pried it open. Upon finding no glittering gems among the remains, they decided to strip the corpse naked, thinking that all the treasure must be on his body. In the end, all they found was a $10 pair of cufflinks, which they promptly stole. Dr. Elwood Kirby was taken to the receiving vault where he was dressed in new clothing and placed into a new casket, all before the press had a chance to come in and photograph the scene. If there's anybody who might have had a few choice words for his post-mortem attackers, it might just be Dr. Kirby.
Yeah.
So the cemetery used to have ghost hunts, but I can't find anything about them doing them anymore. But they do have plenty of tours scheduled throughout the year, and there's a lot of things going on in October, which is pretty typical.
Sure.
And those tours take you to the possible hotspots. From there, you're on your own. So I want to say I find the history of the cemetery interesting. I've always thought cemeteries is a place where you could do ancestral research and not much more. Never would I have guessed that you would be able to purchase tickets to go hang out at the cemetery, or that, like Laurel Hills, there would be a gift shop at the end that you could purchase souvenirs at.
Chad, you always exit through the gift shop.
I know. I should have assumed it.
No better.
So again, not really one that we can say is it paranormal or not, but some interesting stories there that could definitely lead to some hauntings.
So yeah. Well, I can say a couple of things, and thanks for all that information. That's amazing. My knowledge of the cemetery was about 10 minutes before we came on. I Googled it and found their website because I had a curiosity, and we chatted about this, just a few minutes before we came in too. So my last name is Widener, and it's not unusual or anything, but it is more of for me, my family's from Southern Virginia. However, and I talked about this a while back, so it might be a remembrance here for you, but bear with me. When we all came over from Europe, as we were coming to America, we landed in Philadelphia, in the East Coast, and some stayed in Philly in the region, and the rest went south. The ones that stayed in Philadelphia became embedded in the textile trade and made a lot of money. And the University of Widener University is part of that. There's a Widener Library. There's a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. My Southern root family went into agriculture, didn't do nearly as well, but the lack of affluence in the South meant that they were not so well off that they were on the maiden voyage of the Titanic, which we all know what happened there. So I've lost family who are technically interred in Laurel Hill, even though the remains were never found from the disaster that the Titanic was.
Right.
And the cemetery has a really nice website, by the way. It's laurelhillphl.com. There is an overview map, and it looks like it's a golf course. It's so big, as far as and if you put in your family's name or anybody's last name, it'll bring up any records thereof. I can tell you that I have family buried in the cemetery as far back as 1879. So, wow. Hence, because that's the Philadelphia roots of the other half of my family. And that person was 64 years old. Her name was Sarah Widener. So, my family being in Philadelphia and the region from early 1800s on. So it's quite interesting that you have such great public records, at your fingertips. I don't know of any other local cemetery, at least. Like we have a Laurel Hill here in our area. I don't know if you knew that or not. It's in Columbia. It's up on top of the hill, right next to the high school of all places. It's been there. It's older than the school, so
right.
But it's an odd thing to have the football field right next to a cemetery. There's probably some jokes about burying the other team when they come in, but trust me, our teams aren't that good. But the cemetery has a very, very thorough website with lots of cool stuff. The research tab is where all those things can be found. So,
right.
Of course, they have lots of events, as you mentioned, and the tours. The tours really seem like the cool thing. Going back to the haunted thing, or the paranormal question that we always ask. We asked ourselves a question when we did the Hansgrohe Cemetery episode way back. Right. Why aren't there ghosts at cemeteries? And I'm like, well, I thought my opinion is there's much better places for people to be than hanging around with a bunch of dead people.
Right.
The lore of that cemetery is at least the folklore of that cemetery is that there is a a curse for those who trespass, walk around the perimeter of the cemetery 7 times under the light of a full moon. A white werewolf will come and take you by dawn.
Right.
Well, we're still here, so right.
Either we messed it up, or there's no. Yeah.
And we know many others in our team who have done it since then too. So it is an interesting thing.
Right.
The lore of cemeteries, the creepiness of it. I'll say something a little different. Growing up in the, as a kid of the 80s, I remember vividly the Michael Jackson Thriller video, right? He with his girlfriend going to the movies, coming out and walking her home, and they go in front of the cemetery and the song starts, and then of course that iconic video that it was. But that idea, and then there's another phrase that comes to me when you're trying to avoid something obvious. The phrase, like you're whistling past the graveyard. You're doing anything you can do to distract you from this thing. It's over here that is, you don't want to have to deal with.
Right.
So you're just trying to, get yourself past it as quickly as you can. Cemeteries have built up this kind of lore that way, and it's interesting, because really it's just a bunch of dead people.
Right. So going back through some comments. Todd and Carmela, no, I did not get a chance to go to Laurel Hills. I've been swamped at work, and haven't had time to do much else right now, which is good because things were slow for a really long time. So, but no, I didn't get together there. I think it would be interesting to go visit and just see, and you have family there, Jamie. So
yeah, good reason to go.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that there were no cows when you guys were there.
This could lead to cow tipping. See it tie into another episode.
There we go. The Lynches, Heather, I'm not sure if anybody knows, but Heather is sensitive and sees people or sees spirits. And the comment was the only spirit that Heather saw at a cemetery was an Asian guy that had just been buried, and he was actually yelling at her. We think he was confused and didn't realize what was going on, which that sort of makes sense if the death happened unexpectedly, and maybe that would be a reason that you are tied to your body and to the, why is it here? Why is it in a cemetery? So that is sort of interesting.
It's just like Beetlejuice, right? The couple dies and they need a guide. They don't know what's going on. They don't know where they are.
So
speaking of Beetlejuice, Chad, part 2.
It's coming out.
It's coming.
So, and then Jenny said their elementary school's playground is right next to a cemetery, separated by a chain link fence. So
I know the feeling.
So,
well, and you mentioned this earlier on too, like the question of like, have you ever done things? And I can say in the borough of Columbia, where I grew up, there is a downtown cemetery, which is the original cemetery for the borough. That is like right in the smack of downtown. Like, it's near a church, but it's not associated to it. It is a full block wide and deep, and a wrought iron fence all the way around it. And in that they have, they've struggled like everybody does. Upkeep, maintenance. The tombstones are fading fast, especially the old ones in the very back. The original ones, they're crumbling. And they have come to have an oddities festival or fair a couple times a year as a way to have vendors come in, pay up an attendance fee or use fee, and then have like a booth or something set up where they can have donations for like the friends of the cemetery.
Right.
And Em and I went a couple months ago, I guess back when
it was June, I think, May or June.
Back in June, it was beginning of summer, and it was really interesting. And there were a lot of vendors, there were a lot of people there as well, and it was a free admission thing, so no cover charge kind of deal. But it was interesting because the vendors were set up in and amongst the tombstones along the pathway of the drive that you can't drive through it. You can drive through it, but it's a 1-lane thing. It was really interesting, a creative use of the space, and of course. You're in a cemetery, so it has to almost be an oddities thing, but something tieable, to the field. But it was really well attended. So it was cool.
Todd and Carmela just said, when we went to visit, it was initially of a paranormal mindset, but it quickly changed to more the beauty and historic aspect of those who were interred. We actually had an event tour. They actually had an event tour when we were leaving. So that's cool.
Okay.
And I find the idea of a mixed use place like that interesting, because not trying to be disrespectful, but it is a huge resource that is given to a single purpose most of the time.
Right.
And we were talking about, between the two, the West Hill and the Laurel Hills and Laurel Hills West, you're talking almost 300 acres of land that is used, and that is definitely.
Oh, these people are great, whoever they are.
So they also came across a couple who got married close to the Harry Callis resting place. So
there's stadium seats there. Why not? Right?
Yep. There's two pairs of stadium seats there, which I think is really cool. I mean, but again, it's just, being able to use it and having the arboretum there, and just it's not where I want my final resting place to be, but I'm glad that these places exist for people who that's what they want, and but they can be used for other things. They can be used for events that are respectful, things like that. Sure. So.
Well, it goes to, you mentioned there's like I think you mentioned a scattering field or scattering area. Mm-hmm. There are those who don't wish to have a traditional in-ground interment, and wish to instead be cremated. And of course, the idea of having someone sitting on the mantle, may not appeal or want to be where someone wants to end up. They have a desire for, I lived in California for a while, and I always came across on the weekends, like at Big Sur or something, somebody coming out and literally open up an urn or a can of some kind, and mm-hmm. there goes ashes, mm-hmm. out to the ocean. There are plenty of ways now to find your final place, and right. Even to be scattered in such a beautiful place, you go back into nature that way. So I think it's really kind of cool. Mm-hmm. that there's such a creative difference of how to do it versus a traditional. You're going in a box in the ground, and mm-hmm. that's it.
Yep. So a couple of comments that came in. Heather's like, I have always found cemeteries to be peaceful and calm, even the old scary ones. I agree. Todd said, I'm a horticulturalist and thoroughly enjoyed that aspect also. Birds, that's why they have great markers in landscaping. Why have markers if nobody is going to visit? I mean, sure. And you think about some of these old cemeteries that nobody goes and visits anymore.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah, at some point, and this is kind of morbid, but eventually, if there is not a continuation of a family line, someone's going to be the last one. Mm-hmm. And at that point, there won't be anyone to come to the site. And, with the world changing as rapidly as it has over the last 50 years or 68, whatever, 100 years even, we can go anywhere we want anymore.
Right.
A lot of people stay in the same place they were born, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But many others move away and move on. And sometimes they just don't make it back. And that means that no one's there to visit anymore, or at least minimal. And that's it makes it seem sad, but in a certain way, that's also very positive that we all can go and do what we want.
Jenny,
yeah,
Jenny said, if I were someone who wanted to be cremated and put there or buried there, I'd love the idea of people strolling around and sculptures and children playing around me. How lovely!
Absolutely. I'll say this too. And bear with me on this. I'm sorry mm-hmm. to bring this in, but being morbid as we are talking about cemeteries, my mother passed away when I was 4 months old, and she is buried in Mountjoy, and actually not very far away from where the Booby family is buried in the Mountjoy Cemetery.
Okay.
I pass by their set, their plot all the time, going to hers, growing up, and even still. And I remember being a kid, we would like on a Sunday afternoon, we would go and, aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody would go out to the cemetery, and it's on the side of a hill. It's got a beautiful farm view off to the, heading toward 283, so off to the east. And, I would remember, I knew what I was there for, but I was also, after a little bit of time, very bored. And I would run around in the tombstones and play and stuff. And, we would have a lunch sometimes with us because there were that many people. We never got together anywhere else. So, and to Jenny's point and the spirit of it all, it is a gathering point as well to pay respects to your lost ones. It's not like you just walk up and look at it, the tombstone, and walk away. You want to spend some time with them. And, I remember we all had many conversations with my mom, even though she wasn't really with us. So
yeah,
I see no fault there. I think that's a really great thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that's the spirit that's continued.
Yeah. Todd also said, did you see the picture I shared of one grave that was right on Kelly Drive of the gentleman who was the first explorer of the Arctic Circle and the North Pole? Alicia Kent Kane. So, Todd has a really nice reel of different pictures he took from the cemetery. So,
now, in every episode, the last 5 or 6 weeks now, we've come to, somebody has said road trip in it, right? Yep. So here we are again. This fits us actually on our way to somewhere. We could spend the afternoon, go to an investigation site in the evening, overnight, or hit it on the way back in the morning. So,
yeah.
And the old adage for Philly is more fun when they stay over. So there it is. Yep, Jenny's got it. Road trip. There it is. It's only a matter of time until it came up.
I was seeing if I could find this real quick, but I can't. So anyway, yeah. Any final thoughts on that, Jamie? It's definitely an interesting history. And it shocks me, and this was the times we lived in, though, that it was 1973.
I think this is the made up number, but I don't think it's that far off. Number 10 to the list. So yeah, we gotta start writing this stuff down. Something, we gotta get a spreadsheet, or, start plotting some stuff on Google Maps. So, and as always, I'm in, so let's do it. Right.
Yeah.
So we needed a plane last time, right? So now we need to find ourselves, Bert's a coach driver, right? I don't know if you need a special license or not, but I'm sure it can't be that hard. But we need like a minibus of some kind. We'll all just hop in and go.
First Romania, yeah.
That's true. You go further first, right? Then you work your way back.
Yep. So anyway, what I'm saying, I find it hard to believe that it was 1973 before the restrictions were lifted on who could be buried here. I'm just,
yeah,
Jamie, that's our lifetime.
It is. Yeah, thanks, dude. Of course.
But it seems like
I did remind myself it's a family podcast right there. The word I wanted to say. But yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. And but it's not too far away from an era of things that weren't so good. So it's kind of not surprising. It's surprising, but it's not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, well,
I think what I thought was really interesting early on too was like the cemetery was promoting. Yeah, that's not us. But the promotion of opportunities for married couples versus single individuals.
Right.
And I get it to some degree because if you have a plot and you buy in, and then as a single person, and then you meet that one and you become two, the other person doesn't have a spot.
Right.
And sure, but it's no different. And this is a different era now than it was then. But now with transitions of lifestyles, you could have a plot together and not be together anymore. And do you really want to spend your rest of eternity next to somebody you don't really like that much anymore? So I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
There's a dynamic to that.
Definitely. So yeah, definitely it's interesting things. And then I know my grandparents, my grandfather was a veteran, so my grandparents had bought plots in a military area of a cemetery in Reading. Well, as they got more and more friends when they moved to Shillington, which is, 10 miles away, maybe not even that far, they decided to get plots in that cemetery with their friends. Like they're all their neighbors are like buried as neighbors. And so we like, it's going to get, it's something I'm going to inherit at some point because my mom never dealt with it. We have 2 plots at this military cemetery, or military section of a cemetery that obviously I can't use them, and it's so I'm at some point it's going to be that we're going to donate them back to them, but it's
right.
people
when the time's right, of course.
Yeah. So anyway, we digress.
Yeah. You should roll in there and put out some lounge chairs and just hang out, have a picnic.
Mm-hmm. So
it's your spot.
So
that's the other thing. Like that used to be a deal too. Like and the creation of Laurel Hill is really appropriate for this. But families used to, and like my family, we would get together, and there would be sandwiches, and stuff, and like. Everybody would have chairs in the back of their car anyway, so we'd pull them out, and not necessarily at the tombstone per se, but someplace an open space. The Mount Joy Cemetery has a reservoir at the edge of it, and it has a track around it. We would go down that way a lot of times and just be there. And it was great for the kids too, like me and my cousins, because we could run around the track. And just kind of it was fenced, so we didn't have to worry about falling in. But it's a thing where you would have like an event day, and just go picnicking.
Mm-hmm. So, and
it was calm and quiet. You don't have to worry. It's like the beach where you got people all over,
mm-hmm.
So let's go do it.
So, Jim asked if you can camp out. I don't think so. I think they do have hours like that they're open, but I'm not positive on that.
That's interesting. Yeah. I bet you it's a whole different vibe at night, though. Yeah, because your imagination starts then, like everything's different in the dark no matter what. But the idea that it's the cemetery and there must be ghosts, and ghosts only happen at night, right? Right. So, yeah, right. But the mind wandering at that point would probably be more of an issue than anything physical that would happen.
Mm-hmm. So Todd and Carmela said, perhaps on a revisit to Laurel Hill, we can respectfully visit the 3 graves that Chad mentioned with possible paranormal aspect and do an EVP Q&A and see if we get any responses. Maybe.
Sure.
So, I mean, I've visited. When I went to an investigation earlier this year. We were doing a 2-night investigation, so there was time to kill before we could get into the venue. And we went. The group went and visited a cemetery at the one night. And I just found it to be a weird experience. Like I'm not one. I never thought I would do that. First of all, go visit a cemetery at night to investigate. But I was with the group, and I was like, it was interesting. Not that we got much activity. Or at least not. I didn't get much activity. There were some people who were more sensitive who got some things. And then the next day we went during the day to another cemetery, and we're being respectful, but definitely an interesting experience. But I think that's the key is make sure you're respectful while you're there.
Yeah. Well, let me share something here too, because I can't believe I forgot about this. The cemetery mentioned in the downtown part of Columbia Borough is called Mount Bethel. And again, a really old cemetery. As teenagers, and not old enough to drive teenagers because we would have went cruising otherwise back then, we would go run around in the cemetery at night. And it was gated, it was fenced and gated, but it was never shut as far as secured. And you're playing like tag with your friends, and you're running around in the dark, and it's enough ambient light from street lights and houses and stuff, but it's in the middle of the cemetery. It's pretty dark. And I remember we were all running along, and all of a sudden one of our friends yelled really loud and made no other sounds. So we're like, what the heck? So eventually the game was over, and we went to go find him because he didn't come back. So we did find him he fell into an open grave
Oh,
that was dug for an interment, I guess the next day or whatnot, fresh grave basically. And he was down in it, and he sprained his ankle, I think, or something like that. He just couldn't climb himself out, and he was afraid to yell because he didn't want to be it, and he couldn't. He would be it in the pit in the grave,
right.
and he couldn't. He wouldn't be able to not be it again, or he couldn't tag anybody else. So we assured him the game was over. We pulled him out. We hobbled him out of the cemetery, but there are some negatives for roaming around in the dark in such places.
Yeah. So I did pull up their website. They are during the spring for the summer, spring to fall. They're open 7 to 7, and then in the fall they're open 7 to 5. And it sounds like they do close their gates.
Sure.
And the note that said, and this is on their plan your visit page, says there's no cost to visit Laurel Hill. We invite you to enjoy the pleasure of using our grounds recreationally, but please respect those who are grieving. Avoid biking or walking in the presence of a funeral procession, graveside burial, or memorial ceremony. So it sounds like they encourage people to come ride their bikes and, but just be respectful. So,
well, from what I can see too, it looks, most cemeteries I've been to are like 1-lane drives through. You're edging off to the shoulder a little bit if you stop. Here it looks like it's a 2-lane street everywhere I've seen. So it's meant to be that wide, and I'm sure there were carriages, not cars, created and all that, but it gives you that feel of being able to do more stuff like that too, where you're not running over somebody to pass. If you've ever been on like a, rail to trail or something, it's only so wide that if you run a bike, you take up the whole thing, try not to run over humans, or animals, because you got to get off the trail to go around. So it has that kind of comforting, warming, engaging, come on in feel to it.
Yeah,
that you described already, so that's cool.
And I'm looking at some of the pictures on their website. There's one of families sitting with a headstone, like they all have camp chairs set up, and they're sort of sounds like what you were talking about, Jamie. They're just sitting there,
having a pop in your hand, So sandwich in the other,
pictures with pets, and it looks like people just sitting and enjoying the sun. It's really great to see the place used like that. So
absolutely. Well, it is as much a park as it is a cemetery.
Yep.
So it makes sense.
And it's right next to Fairmount Park. I don't know if you realize that or not.
Yes, I do. Actually, I know exactly where it is.
Okay.
I got to address this comment from Jenny. Oh no, nightmares after that, right? No, not me. First of all, it wasn't me. And we were young and dumb and stuff, so I run into that guy every once in a while, and I do make fun of him, but a lot of other things he did too that were pretty dumb, but no. So, the innocence of youth right there.
So, well, we could go on for a while about this topic, but maybe we should talk about what's coming up.
Yeah, well, actually, I have a question for you first. For everybody. This was something this is the perfect place to ask. So, this was asked of me today from somebody who knows what we do. Okay. And it was very simple question. Would you rather go to the basement of a haunted house where there's a ghost to do your laundry, or take your clothes to the laundromat?
I mean, you ready for my answer? Or?
I am ready for anyone's answer at this point. It's for everybody.
I would rather go to the basement and hang out.
Me too. They look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, I don't like people enough to go to the laundromat, in a good way.
Laundromats are weird. You sit there, there's a bunch of people there you don't talk to, and you just
Yeah. But the difference here is this, right? There are two kinds of people, right? There are those who are afraid of ghosts, and those who are afraid of living people. So I'm like, I'm in the basement. I'm in my basement all the time anyway.
I'll hang out with the non-corporeal anytime.
Exactly.
So
they don't sat you back.
Should that be the poll question when I post this?
It could be, yeah.
So
Jenny's in the club, and so is Bert.
Yeah.
So basement for sure. That's the good one. Depends on the spirit. Depends how much laundry there is to do too. I mean, the benefit of the laundromat is you get a bunch of washers. You can do it all one big load, or big run. At home you got to wait. So that's a good point.
So,
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I traveled for many, many years and spent months away at times. And, you would have to do your laundry, and then, it would go into the suitcase that it came in. I would roll it into the laundromat, and you get the weirdest look when you do that. Um, from the locals who were walking in with their baskets and baskets and baskets. But I would unload it, and it would be enough to basically do one load. And I would just throw it all in one machine, pull it out of one machine, throw it in one dryer, be done, throw it all back in the suitcase, and literally walk out. So I've spent enough time in laundromats. I'm in the basement all day.
That works for me. Same here. So.
And Jim, hey Jim, wash white sheets only. So your ghost.
And then Heather, I would have a nice conversation with the ghost. Laundromats have too many alive people.
That's a fair point. That's me all day too.
Yeah. So.
All right. Oh, sorry. Click that again. All right. Thanks for indulging me there. I thought that was a great question. You get to catch up with friends, right?
Yeah. Jenny said, just me, my high capacity, high efficiency washer, and dead Uncle Fred. Thank you. Yep. So, yep. So.
Yeah. Does Fred fold though? Is the question.
So. I just think, I do think a trip to Laurel Hills at some point would be really cool. If you get a chance to go, let us know that you've gone, or, maybe we'll do a group trip together on this one too. But I think it's definitely worth the history side of it and the landscaping and just, some of this architecture and the monuments. I didn't go into the monuments, but there's some really famous artists who have done some of the monuments here as well. So.
Yeah, and that's you showed a slide early on of the gentleman from Scotland, and I'm drawing a Scott, I believe his name was.
Sure.
That can't be right. Scott from Scotland. Anyway, the horse in the background, that kind of ornateness is available in cemeteries like this because of its age and its era. That kind of artistic quality that, and it's in homes of the era too. It's just part of what it was. That was society and culture and normalcy. We just don't find that anymore. And it adds to the beauty of the place with all the landscaping and the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, that might be something we're onto then, right? Not a road trip per se, but a meetup somewhere along the way, and a date and a time, and say, if you can make it, be there, we'll be there too. And we'll go from there.
Yep.
All
so
right.
It'd be sort of a central meeting place for a bunch of us. I mean,
that's true.
So,
and anyone along the way wants to join, of course.
Definitely. So, all
right.
Shoot us an email and we'll set up a time.
Yes. Hey, we did get an email, by the way. It was me. That's to make sure it worked. It did.
So it did. So anyway, let's move on, Jamie. You want to talk about what's coming up? Oh, and I still have today's up there. Look at that.
Yeah. So apparently today we're going to talk about Laurel Hill Cemetery on August 13th. I don't know, Chad, are you prepared to cover this topic today?
No, not at all.
Oh, geez. All right. Well, okay. Well, next week I'll be more prepared. Next week we're going to talk about Tulpa. It's funny how when you're building an episode, and you guys don't know how long this takes us, but sometimes it can be weeks. Hopefully it's not hours. Sometimes it might be, but sometimes it's mostly days and weeks. And the more I dig into Tulpa, which I've been working on for probably 2 weeks now, the bigger it keeps getting. So I've got to start getting down to a manageable time frame. So grab a snack next week just in case it might go long. But after that, Chad's going to tackle the folklore of Ireland, the island of Ireland, specifically the puka. And after that, on the September 3rd, I'm going to cover Pawleys Island, the haunted Pawleys Island, or Pawleys Island ghost. Behind that is going to be Chad tackling a Philly area staple of Selma Mansion, another road trip site, I'm sure, as we'll find out when we get to it. And then coming behind that on September 17th, I'm going to cover the Dilatov Pass mystery, which is a big one. Too, that one might get long as well. It's starting to unfold for me. So, so some really cool stuff coming up. Hope you're with us. And Jenny's, can't wait for the Tulpa episode. My absolute favorite subject. It is becoming mine as well. So hopefully I'll I'll share something you may not know, and obviously I'll look for your input as well.
Yeah. So, Selma mentioned me, depending, I'm trying to get some people from Selma, so that one may have to shift depending on availability and what happens, but that's the plan right now. So
cool. That's very cool. As always, we haven't had a guest in a little while, so that'll be really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about some events we got. So we've been talking about this for a couple weeks now, but the Spooktacular event is coming up on October 19th at Booby's Brewery in Mountjoy, PA. So this is a big collaborative event where we're going to have Daryl Marston from A&E's Ghost Hunters join us, and Daryl's a friend of the team. He's been with us a couple times through the years, both actually over at the Haldeman Mansion, our original home base, and then with us at the brewery as well. And then for a first time that I'm aware of coming into the brewery, at least, is Ron and Lourdes with Staticom, which is a fantastic. They've been on they've been a guest of the show along with, oh my gosh,
Tony
Rathman. Jeez, I'm so sorry, Tony. With them all in separate episodes, but coming in and discussing how Staticom has grown and the wonderful awesomeness that it really has. I'm so excited for this, to see it actual in person. I wish I could have made it to the Bash this year in Gettysburg, as they had a full expo where they're at currently with all the upgrades they've done. So I'm so looking forward to this. We've been doing the brewery for so many years now, and we are getting the evidence that we capture on audio and such, but having their element, I think is going to up the game dramatically. So I'm really excited to see where this goes when they're there on October 19th.
So while you're talking about them, I'm just going to interject this really quickly. This coming weekend on August 17th, Ron and Lourdes and Tony and Cherie are actually going to be in Gettysburg again.
Right.
Presenting at the Association for Paranormal Research Symposium. So, and that was my dog tearing down the steps.
I think Maggie's in the room. I can hear her.
So, yeah, there's actually I'm not able to make it because I'm doing something with my family 10 miles down the road that day, but it would be definitely worth going to see this. If there's still tickets available, I would suggest if you can.
They're one of many as well for the symposium, as far as presenters and lecturers and so forth. It's going to be a full day. I too cannot make it. Unfortunately, I thought that would be not a bad alternative to not making it to the Bash, but unfortunately I'm also tied up there. So I'm gonna have to wait till October. That's just how it looks anyway.
Yep. So okay. So anyway, speaking of other things coming up.
Yep. Let me change that over. So we have our usual public investigations coming up. So we're a little ways off till September 7th for our next one. But 2 in the month of September, the 7th and 28th at the brewery. Back again on the 12th of October for a regular public investigation, and then the Spooktacular event on the 19th. And then November 16th and December 7th will wrap out the year. And man, oh man, it's hard to believe we're talking about the end of 2024 already. Feels like we were just talking about the end of 23, 10 minutes ago. So the public events are ticketed. They're boobiesbrewery.com is where you can get the tickets for the events. As we always say that there is, if you're coming from out of the area, there's accommodations available on site. There is a bed and breakfast upstairs on the 3rd floor, and also across the street at the Malt Baron Mansion, there is an Airbnb available with kind of bigger accommodations there if you have a group coming. So really cool place on the National Historical Register, active location. We are the host team there as Jott-Nyx Paranormal. So please come and investigate with us. If you've never done it before, we'll teach you how. We can use our equipment. If you've been at it for a long time, bring your gear, and we'll jump right into it. So, but never a dull moment, never a dull event there with activity. So look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. And how to find us. If you've obviously, hopefully you found us one of these methods already, but Facebook is our primary, TikTok, Instagram. We're on YouTube, as well as Spotify, Apple, and Audible. So if you're listening to us out there, instead of watching us, we are a video podcast. So, with that, bear in mind, there was slides available for this episode showing Laurel Hill Cemetery. But if you're on one of the other outlets, feel free to drop us a comment if you can, depending on your outlet. And you certainly can always give us a review. We say it all the time. 5 stars are great. We really appreciate that. Hopefully, you found something worthy of it. We're not asking for 6, 7, 8, 9, or even 10 stars. So 5 seems pretty moderate. We'll go from there. I can always say that without making a joking, but we really appreciate you watching, no matter what, whether you review or not. So.
Yeah.
On Spotify too, there are quizzes or a poll at the bottom of every episode. So feel free to jump into those. Those are kind of fun too. And then you can always leave reviews for the episode. So if you're like, hey, you guys nailed it on Laurel Hill Cemetery, feel free to say so. Or if you're like, well, I think you should talk about this, let us know too.
Yep.
And that's my final thought is, if there's anything at all you'd like us to cover, we're always happy to do so. As we look at this was a listener submitted episode from Todd and Carmela.
Mm-hmm.
The Puka episode coming up in a few weeks is from Bert and Heather. So, we've done it for others before in the past. So, if you got something you're interested in, get in there and let us know. And don't have to leave it in the review. Just email us at Jott-Nyx. Geez, I'm sorry. Different email. Paranormallenspodcast@gmail.com is the easy way to find us. And it does work. We know now. So feel free to drop a line. We'll go from there.
So, yep.
All right, Chad. Thoughts? Anything on the way out?
My mind is mush right now. It's been a long week, so I don't have.
I know.
I can't think. So
enough said. Then. All right.
I was happy to be able to get through the episode. So we're
really good job. Very thorough as always. I
thank you. So
fantastic. So thank you.
All right. Well, we will see everybody next week. Same place, same channel, all those things.
Yeah, the usual. Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Stay spooky, everybody.